What happens when a normally calm Hollywood star walks onto a daytime talk show stage expecting a friendly conversation? And within minutes, the entire tone of the discussion shifts. Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The cameras roll, the audience applauds, and the familiar table of The View lights up as the hosts settle in. Whoopi Goldberg sits at the center, giving her signature calm smile as she glances down at her notes. "All right, everybody, welcome back," she says as the applause fades. "We've got a great guest joining us today. You've seen her in everything from romantic comedies to powerful dramas, and she's here talking about her new project." The audience cheers louder as Rachel McAdams walks out. She waves, clearly a little shy but smiling warmly. Whoopi stands up to greet her, giving her a quick hug before gesturing toward the chair beside the hosts. "Rachel, good to see you," Whoopi says. Rachel laughs lightly as she sits down. "It's good to be here. I've watched this show for years, so this is a little surreal." "You picked a good day to come," Whoopi jokes. "Sometimes we behave." The audience laughs. Across the table, Joy Behar leans forward immediately. "That's not a promise, though," she says, smirking. Rachel laughs again, relaxing a bit. Next to Joy sits Sunny Hostin, who smiles warmly. "We're happy you're here. I just want to say I loved your last film." "Oh, thank you," Rachel says sincerely. At the far end of the table, Alyssa Farah Griffin nods politely but watches quietly as the conversation starts. Whoopi begins the segment the way the show often does. "So, Rachel, your new project has people talking. It's not the typical role people expect from you." Rachel nods. "Yeah, it's definitely different for me. It's a story that deals with family dynamics, but also a lot of social issues." Joy raises an eyebrow. "You're getting serious on us." Rachel shrugs playfully. "I guess so." The audience laughs. Sunny jumps in. "But you've done that before. I mean, people remember the romance movies, but you've taken on complex roles too." Rachel nods. "That's what I love about acting. You get to explore different perspectives." Whoopi leans back slightly. "Now the film touches on some political themes, right?" Rachel pauses for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "It does," she says. "But it's really more about empathy and understanding how people see the world differently." That comment gets a few approving murmurs from the audience. Joy nods. "Empathy. We could use more of that." But Alyssa finally speaks up. "Well, that depends on what kind of empathy we're talking about." The tone shifts just slightly. Rachel glances toward her. Alyssa continues calmly. "I think sometimes Hollywood says empathy, but it only goes one direction. And a lot of people watching at home feel like their perspectives are ignored." A few audience members react with mixed murmurs. Whoopi raises an eyebrow, but lets the conversation continue. Rachel nods slowly. "I actually think that's part of the problem," she says carefully. "People assume actors live in some bubble." Joy smirks. "Well, some do." The audience laughs again. Rachel smiles but continues. "But honestly, the project we worked on involved talking to people from a lot of different backgrounds." Alyssa tilts her head. "But do you think Hollywood really represents those voices?" she asks. Rachel looks thoughtful. "I think it tries to." Alyssa responds quickly. "Because a lot of Americans would say it doesn't." There's a slight tension now. Sunny jumps in. "Hollywood isn't a single voice, though," she says. "There are thousands of people working in the industry." Alyssa nods. "True. But culturally it leans very strongly one direction." Joy waves her hand dismissively. "Oh please, culture leans wherever people buy tickets." The audience laughs again. Rachel smiles awkwardly as the conversation grows more political than she expected. Whoopi notices it. "See, Rachel, this is what happens here," she jokes. Rachel laughs nervously. "I can see that." But Alyssa turns back to Rachel. "I'm curious though," she says. "When actors talk about social issues publicly, do you think there's a responsibility to understand the full picture?" Rachel pauses again. "That's a fair question." The audience quiets slightly. "I think anyone speaking publicly should try to understand the full picture," Rachel says. Alyssa nods but presses further. "Because sometimes celebrities make statements about policy or politics without actually living the reality many Americans face." The audience reacts again, some clapping, some murmuring. Joy leans forward immediately. "Oh, come on. Actors are citizens too." Alyssa responds calmly. "Of course they are." Rachel tries to ease the tension. "I don't think anyone is claiming actors have all the answers," she says. Sunny nods. "That's exactly right." But Alyssa continues. "But they do have a massive platform." Rachel nods again. That's true. Whoopi finally steps in with a calm voice. And sometimes people use their platform for good. Alyssa responds carefully. And sometimes it alienates half the country. Now the audience reaction grows louder. Rachel shifts slightly in her seat. She's still smiling, but there's a clear seriousness now. Well, she says slowly, I think the bigger question is whether we're willing to actually listen to each other. Joy nods strongly. Yes. Alyssa folds her hands. But listening goes both ways. Rachel looks directly at her now. I agree with that. For a moment, the table goes quiet. Whoopi watches both of them carefully. Rachel continues. But I also think it's easy to dismiss someone just because they work in entertainment. Alyssa replies immediately. I'm not dismissing you. Rachel nods politely. I know, but there's clearly a disagreement forming. Sunny senses it. I think what Rachel is saying is that artists reflect culture. Alyssa responds quickly. And I'm saying culture includes people who feel completely left out of those conversations. Joy raises her voice slightly. Oh my God, everybody feels left out these days. The audience bursts into laughter. Rachel smiles, but then adds something more serious. I actually met people during this project who told me they feel invisible in media. Alyssa nods. That's exactly my point. Rachel continues. But they didn't all share the same politics. The audience claps softly at that. Rachel looks around the table. They just wanted their stories heard. For a moment, everyone pauses. Whoopi leans forward. Well, that's something we can probably all agree on. But Alyssa speaks again, this time a little more direct. I guess the question is, whose stories actually get told? The tension returns. Rachel answers calmly. Hopefully more and more voices over time. Alyssa raises an eyebrow slightly. But is that really happening? Rachel meets her gaze. I think it is. Joy whispers dramatically. Oh! The audience laughs again, sensing the brewing debate. Rachel chuckles, but then adds one more line. But change takes time. Alyssa leans forward slightly. And accountability. The audience reacts again. Whoopi looks at both of them. All right, she says slowly, smiling at the tension. I feel like we're just getting started here. Rachel laughs softly. I think so too. But the audience can already feel it. The conversation is about to get much more intense. The audience is still reacting when the conversation picks back up at the table on The View. There's a noticeable shift in energy now. The kind that happens when a discussion stops being polite and starts becoming real. Whoopi Goldberg glances between Rachel McAdams and Alyssa Farah Griffin, clearly aware that the conversation has moved beyond the usual promotional interview. Well, Whoopi says with a half smile, this is what happens when we mix Hollywood and politics at 9 in the morning. The audience laughs lightly. Rachel smiles too, but she looks thoughtful now, leaning slightly forward. I didn't mean to turn this into a political debate, she says. Joy Behar jumps in immediately. Oh, don't worry, we do that ourselves, Joy says, waving her hand. You're just along for the ride. More laughter from the audience. Rachel nods, clearly amused but still engaged in the conversation. I guess what I meant earlier, she continues, is that storytelling, whether it's film, television, or even conversations like this, can bring people closer to understanding each other. Sunny Hostin nods in agreement. That's the power of storytelling, Sunny says. It humanizes issues. But Alyssa tilts her head slightly, considering Rachel's point. I don't disagree with that, Alyssa says calmly. But I think the frustration some people feel is that certain viewpoints rarely get humanized in mainstream media. There's a mix of murmurs in the audience again. Rachel listens carefully. That's interesting, she says. Joy leans toward Alyssa with a skeptical smile. Rarely? Come on. There are plenty of different voices out there. Alyssa shrugs slightly. Not always in the spaces that shape cultural narratives. Whoopi raises her eyebrows slightly. That's a big statement. Alyssa nods. I just think a lot of Americans feel like when celebrities speak about issues, they're speaking from a world that looks very different from theirs. Rachel sits back slightly, absorbing that. Well, that might be true sometimes, she admits. The audience reacts with a few surprised murmurs. Sunny turns toward Rachel. You're being very honest right now, she says. Rachel smiles lightly. I try to be. Joy looks impressed. Most actors would just say something safe and move on. Rachel laughs. I probably should have done that. The audience laughs with her. But Alyssa continues the point. The reason I ask these questions, she says, is because when someone with a big platform talks about social issues, people listen. And that influence matters. Rachel nods again. I understand that. Alyssa leans forward slightly. So when you take on projects that touch on political or cultural topics, do you think about how those messages land with people who may disagree? The audience quiets a little. Rachel takes a moment before answering. I do, she says. Joy looks surprised. You do? Rachel nods. Of course. I mean, I'm not trying to lecture anyone. Sunny gestures toward her. That's an important distinction. Rachel continues. For me, it's about asking questions, not telling people what to think. Alyssa considers that, but audiences sometimes interpret films as statements. Rachel nods again. That's true. The conversation feels thoughtful now, but the tension is still under the surface. Whoopi jumps in again. Well, let me ask something, she says. Rachel, when you took this role, did you expect to end up in a conversation like this? Rachel bursts out laughing. No, she says honestly. The audience laughs loudly. I thought we were going to talk about filming stories and embarrassing moments on set. Joy claps her hands once. We can still do embarrassing stories. Rachel smiles, but then looks back toward Alyssa. But honestly, Rachel says, I don't mind the conversation. Alyssa nods respectfully. And I appreciate you engaging with it. Sunny gestures toward the audience. That's actually what viewers want to see, real discussion. Alyssa agrees. Exactly. Joy leans forward again, clearly enjoying the moment. All right, but let me throw something out there, she says. The audience quiets again. Why do people always assume actors shouldn't talk about issues? Joy asks. Athletes talk about issues. Politicians talk about issues. Everybody talks about issues. Alyssa responds calmly. I'm not saying actors shouldn't speak. Joy raises her eyebrows. You kind of sounded like you were. The audience reacts with some laughter. Alyssa smiles slightly but stays composed. What I'm saying is that sometimes people feel talked down to. Rachel looks thoughtful again. That's fair. Sunny glances at her. You're agreeing with everyone today, Sunny jokes. Rachel laughs. I'm trying to listen. Whoopi nods approvingly. That's not a bad approach. But Alyssa presses just a little further. Let me ask you directly, she says. Do you think Hollywood sometimes dismisses people who disagree politically? The audience reacts immediately, some applause, some murmurs. Joy groans jokingly. Oh boy. Rachel looks slightly surprised by the question but doesn't avoid it. I think sometimes people everywhere dismiss those they disagree with. Sunny nods slowly. That's true. Rachel continues. And that includes people in entertainment, politics, media, all of it. Alyssa watches her carefully. So you don't think Hollywood has a bias? Rachel hesitates. The audience waits. Well, Rachel says slowly, every industry has its own culture. Joy whispers loudly to Sunny. That's a very diplomatic answer. Sunny laughs. Rachel smiles. I'm trying to be honest. Alyssa tilts her head again. But culture influences what stories get told. Rachel nods. Yes. And which voices get amplified? Rachel nods again. Yes. So when people say Hollywood pushes a certain worldview, can you understand why they feel that way? Rachel pauses again. This time the room is very quiet. I can understand why someone might feel that way, she says carefully. A few audience members clap. Joy leans back in her chair. Look at that. We're having a civilized discussion. Whoopi laughs. Don't jinx it. The audience laughs too. But Alyssa isn't finished yet. I appreciate that answer, she says to Rachel. Rachel nods politely. But I think there's another layer to this conversation, Alyssa continues. Rachel looks curious. What's that? Alyssa folds her hands on the table. The moment celebrities speak about policy or cultural issues, they often receive massive media coverage. Rachel listens closely. And sometimes that coverage shapes public opinion more than experts or everyday people. Rachel nods slowly. That's a lot of responsibility. Sunny gestures toward her. And she seems aware of that. Alyssa nods. Which is why I'm asking these questions. Joy sighs dramatically. You're cross-examining her like she's running for office. The audience laughs again. Rachel laughs too. I promise I'm not. But then Rachel adds something that changes the energy again. But I do think artists have a responsibility to reflect the world honestly. Alyssa immediately responds. Even if that world includes perspectives that challenge Hollywood? Rachel looks directly at her. Yes. The audience claps louder now. Whoopi raises her eyebrows. Well, that's interesting. Rachel continues. I don't think shutting people out helps anyone. Sunny nods. Exactly. But Alyssa raises one more point. Then why do some voices feel shut out of cultural conversations? Rachel pauses. This time her expression turns more serious. Well, maybe because we don't spend enough time actually listening. The audience claps again, louder this time. But Alyssa isn't backing down. And maybe, she says carefully, because certain voices are dismissed before they're even heard. Rachel looks at her. I don't think that helps either. For a moment, the two women hold eye contact. The audience senses the tension building again. Joy whispers loudly, "This is getting spicy." The audience bursts into laughter. But the discussion clearly isn't over yet. The audience laughter fades, but the energy at the table hasn't gone down. If anything, the discussion is getting more serious. On The View, conversations often start casually and then suddenly turn into something deeper, and that's exactly what's happening now. Whoopi Goldberg leans forward slightly, glancing between Rachel McAdams and Alyssa Farah Griffin. "Okay," Whoopi says calmly, raising her hands slightly. "I feel like we're at that moment where everybody is being very polite, but we also know there's a real disagreement happening." The audience reacts with laughter and applause. Rachel laughs softly. "That might be true," she admits. Across the table, Alyssa nods. "I think it's a healthy disagreement, though." Joy leans in again immediately. "Healthy disagreements are our specialty," Joy Behar says. "We do it every day." The audience laughs again. But Alyssa turns back toward Rachel, still composed but clearly wanting to explore the issue further. "You said something a minute ago that caught my attention," Alyssa says. Rachel nods. "Okay. You said artists have a responsibility to reflect the world honestly." Rachel nods again. "I believe that." Alyssa tilts her head slightly. "So let me ask you something. Do you think Hollywood sometimes presents a version of the world that doesn't actually reflect what many Americans experience?" The audience immediately reacts with a mix of applause and murmurs. Joy leans back dramatically in her chair. "Here we go again," she mutters, smiling. Rachel takes a breath before answering. "I think any industry can fall into echo chambers," she says carefully. Sunny nods right away. Sunny Hostin says, "That's not unique to Hollywood." Alyssa responds quickly, "I agree, but Hollywood has enormous cultural influence." Rachel nods. "That's true." Whoopi jumps in again. "But influence doesn't mean control," Whoopi says. Alyssa nods politely. "Of course, but storytelling shapes perception." Rachel leans forward slightly now, clearly more engaged in the debate. "That's exactly why storytelling matters," she says. The audience claps lightly. Rachel continues. "When people see stories about lives that are different from theirs, it can expand understanding." Joy points at Rachel. "That's what art has always done." But Alyssa responds quickly. "It can also reinforce narratives that leave some people feeling misrepresented." Rachel listens carefully. "I can see that happening sometimes." Alyssa nods. "And when that happens, people push back." Sunny gestures toward the table. "Which is exactly what we're doing right now." The audience laughs. Rachel smiles, but then adds something more serious. "But I think something else is happening too." The table quiets slightly. Rachel continues. "We're living in a time where people assume the worst about each other." The audience murmurs in agreement. Rachel looks around the table. If someone in entertainment speaks about an issue, some people immediately assume they're being arrogant or disconnected. Alyssa nods slowly. And sometimes that assumption comes from past experiences. Rachel nods. "That's fair." Joy leans forward again. "But let's be honest," she says. "People also assume celebrities are out of touch even when they're not." The audience laughs. Sunny adds, "Some of them are though." More laughter. Rachel laughs too. "I mean, we're all human." But Alyssa presses again. "The frustration I hear from people is that their concerns get dismissed as ignorance." Rachel's expression becomes more thoughtful. "I don't think dismissing anyone helps the conversation." Alyssa nods. "That's exactly the point I'm making." Rachel continues. "But I also think there's a danger in assuming bad intentions." The audience reacts softly again. Alyssa folds her hands on the table. "Let me ask you something directly," she says. Rachel nods. "Okay. Have you ever hesitated to express an opinion publicly because you were worried about backlash?" The audience reacts with curiosity. Rachel laughs lightly. "Yes." The audience laughs too. Joy points at her. "Now that's an honest answer." Rachel continues. "I think a lot of people feel that way these days, not just actors." Sunny nods strongly. "That's absolutely true." Alyssa agrees. "Public conversation has become very intense." Rachel nods. And sometimes it feels like if you say one thing wrong, the entire conversation stops being productive. The audience claps at that. Whoopi looks at Rachel thoughtfully. That's something we see here every day. Joy laughs. Oh yeah, but Alyssa raises another point. Do you think Hollywood contributes to that climate sometimes? Rachel pauses. The audience goes quiet again. I think everyone contributes to it, she says carefully. Sunny nods again. That's a fair answer. But Alyssa continues. Because some critics say Hollywood promotes a very narrow set of acceptable opinions. Rachel looks thoughtful. Well, I think industries evolve. Joy chuckles. That's a diplomatic way to say yes. Rachel laughs. I didn't say yes. The audience laughs loudly. Rachel continues. But I do think conversations like this are important. Alyssa nods. I agree. Rachel gestures toward the table. We're disagreeing, but we're also listening. Sunny points at Rachel. That's the key part. Joy nods dramatically. And nobody's thrown a coffee mug yet. The audience bursts into laughter again. But Alyssa shifts the conversation slightly. You mentioned earlier that you spoke to people from different backgrounds while preparing for your role. Rachel nods. Yes. Alyssa asks, did any of those conversations challenge your own views? Rachel immediately answers. Absolutely. The audience murmurs with interest. Rachel continues. I met people whose lives were very different from mine. Sunny leans forward. And that changed your perspective? Rachel nods. Yes. It reminded me that most people aren't defined by political labels. A few audience members clap. Rachel adds, they're just trying to live their lives. Alyssa nods. That's something we probably agree on. Joy gestures dramatically toward them. Look at that, common ground. The audience laughs again. Rachel smiles. But here's the thing, she continues. The room quiets again. When people feel unheard, they stop trusting institutions, media, politics, entertainment, all of it. Alyssa nods. That's exactly what we're seeing. Rachel continues. So maybe the real challenge isn't which industry is right or wrong. Sunny watches closely. Rachel finishes her thought. Maybe the challenge is rebuilding trust. The audience claps loudly now. Whoopi nods slowly. That's a big statement. Joy adds, and a true one. But Alyssa still has one more point. Trust also requires accountability, she says. Rachel nods. I agree. Alyssa leans forward slightly. So when Hollywood gets something wrong, do you think it listens? Rachel pauses again. The audience waits. I think sometimes it does, she says. Joy raises an eyebrow. Sometimes. Rachel laughs nervously. I'm being honest. Sunny smiles. That's refreshing. But Alyssa adds one more line that makes the tension rise again. Because a lot of Americans would say they don't feel heard at all. Rachel looks directly at her. Well, maybe conversations like this are where that starts to change. The audience claps again. But the energy at the table makes it clear. This conversation is far from over. The applause lingers for a moment inside the studio of The View, and you can feel that the entire atmosphere has shifted from a typical celebrity interview into something more serious. The audience can sense it, the hosts can sense it, and even Rachel McAdams looks slightly surprised at how the conversation unfolded. Whoopi Goldberg leans back in her chair with a small smile. Well, she says calmly, this turned into a real morning conversation. The audience laughs and applauds again. Rachel laughs softly too. I promise I didn't come here planning to debate politics. At the far end of the table, Alyssa Farah Griffin smiles politely. And I didn't come here planning to interrogate you, she says. The audience laughs again. Joy Behar waves her hand dramatically. Oh please, Alyssa lives for interrogation, Joy jokes. More laughter fills the room. Alyssa shakes her head, smiling. That's not true. Joy leans closer to Rachel. Don't worry, Joy says. If she was really interrogating you, there would be charts. The audience erupts with laughter. Even Rachel laughs loudly at that. But after the laughter settles, the conversation becomes thoughtful again. Sunny Hostin leans forward slightly. I actually think this was a really productive discussion, Sunny says. Rachel nods. I do too. Sunny continues. Because the truth is, a lot of viewers at home are having these same conversations with friends and family. Alyssa agrees. That's true, Rachel adds quietly, and they're probably having them with a lot less cameras around. The audience laughs again. Whoopi looks around the table. But I think what people saw here today is that disagreement doesn't have to mean disrespect. The audience claps. Rachel nods again. That's something I try to remember. Alyssa turns toward her. And I do appreciate you being willing to answer the questions, Alyssa says sincerely. Rachel smiles. I appreciate you asking them respectfully. Joy leans forward again. Look at this, she says dramatically. Civility on television. The audience laughs loudly. But Whoopi glances toward the studio monitor, where producers often signal when the segment is running out of time. Well, she says, before they start yelling in our ears, we should probably wrap this up. The audience groans playfully. Rachel laughs. That went by fast. Joy looks at her. Trust me, it felt fast for us too. Sunny adds, usually arguments feel longer. More laughter from the audience. But then Alyssa adds something more reflective. You know, she says, looking at Rachel, I think conversations like this are important because people assume everyone in media hates each other. Rachel nods. Yeah, Alyssa continues. And that's not actually true. Whoopi smiles. No, we just argue a lot. The audience laughs. Rachel then adds something thoughtful. I think disagreement is healthy when people actually listen. Sunny nods immediately. Exactly. Joy gestures around the table. And nobody stormed off the stage today. The audience applauds again. Whoopi raises her eyebrows jokingly. That's always our goal. The audience laughs again. Whoopi then turns back to Rachel. Rachel, before we let you go, tell everyone where they can see the new project. Rachel smiles, clearly relieved to talk about something lighter for a moment. Well, the film is coming out later this month, and I'm really proud of it. It's a story about family, identity, and trying to understand people who see the world differently. Joy smirks. So basically today's show. The audience bursts into laughter. Rachel laughs too. Pretty much. Whoopi nods. Well, we wish you the best with it. Rachel smiles warmly. Thank you. And thank you for having me. The audience applauds as Rachel stands and hugs Whoopi again before waving to the crowd. The cameras cut to a wider shot as the show moves toward a commercial break. But what viewers at home didn't see was what happened just after the cameras stopped rolling. Several audience members were still talking among themselves about the debate they had just witnessed. Some were praising Rachel for staying calm and thoughtful throughout the discussion. Others were saying Alyssa asked questions they felt needed to be asked. Inside the studio, the hosts continued chatting casually with Rachel for a few moments before she headed backstage. There was no dramatic exit. No angry confrontation. Just a surprisingly normal conversation after a tense on-air moment. Later that afternoon, clips from the discussion started spreading rapidly across social media. Viewers who watched The View live began posting reactions online. Some people praised Rachel McAdams for staying composed and thoughtful under pressure. Others said Alyssa Farah Griffin asked questions that reflected what many viewers were thinking. Some fans even said it was one of the most balanced conversations they had seen on the show in a long time. On social media, short clips of the moment where Rachel said, "Maybe the real challenge is rebuilding trust," started circulating widely. That line quickly became one of the most quoted parts of the segment. Meanwhile, other clips focused on the moment when Alyssa asked whether Hollywood listens to criticism. That part sparked a huge debate online. Some viewers defended the entertainment industry. Others argued that Alyssa's point was valid. Within hours, the discussion had moved far beyond the studio audience. Entertainment blogs picked up the story. Morning news programs mentioned the exchange. And thousands of viewers shared their own opinions about who they agreed with. But interestingly, many people said the same thing. They appreciated that the conversation didn't turn into shouting. One viewer wrote online that it felt like an actual discussion instead of a TV fight. Another commented that both Rachel and Alyssa handled the moment with respect. Even some critics of the show admitted that the segment felt more genuine than many typical celebrity interviews. Backstage sources later said that Rachel was surprised by how intense the conversation became, but was glad she participated in it. According to staff members, she told producers she appreciated being able to speak honestly instead of sticking to a scripted promotional interview. And as for the hosts, they moved on to the next segment of the show, just like they always do. But the moment stayed with viewers long after the episode ended. Because sometimes the most memorable television moments aren't the loudest ones. Sometimes they're the ones where people simply sit down and talk, even when they don't fully agree. And moments like that are exactly why discussions on The View continue to spark conversation far beyond the studio. If you watched this exchange, what did you think? Did Rachel McAdams handle the discussion well? Or do you think Alyssa Farah Griffin raised important points? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories.